We're going to talk about Newtonian physics and return on investment. Are you sure you're still in the right room? If you thought you were coming in to hear something about soft skills, sorry. I don't believe there are any soft skills. Human interaction, whether it's selling, management, leadership, is physics. It's either Newtonian physics or quantum physics. Quantum physics is the advanced class. We're not going to do that today. What we're going to be talking about is how you get results from salespeople. I hear managers all the time complaining that their salespeople aren't delivering results. They completely focus on their performance. And if you're the manager, it's your fault. The mistake we make is focusing on performance. You look at your salespeople, and their performance isn't where you need it to be. You're the sales manager. You're under pressure from the sales director. The sales director is under pressure from the CEO. The CEO is under pressure from the shareholders. For what? Results, performance. So if the performance isn't where it needs to be, the conversations that happen are around the, hey, come on, sell more, get better results. So we just nag about the performance. Leave nagging to the people who are good at it. Nagging doesn't help. Interestingly as well, for managers, if you spend all your time repetitively nagging, saying, come on, do this, do this, do this. You know, I've told them and I've told them and I keep telling them and they still don't do it. Every time after that first conversation, you are wasting time. You're not paid to waste time. You're paid to get a result. Now, wouldn't it be nice if you could bring that performance conversation down to a one-time conversation? One conversation. The two things that HR directors tell me and CEOs tell me when we have our first conversations is that measuring the return on investment from training, that's difficult. And dealing with performance issues just like that, that's impossible. I love that when somebody tells me it's impossible. Everything we're talking about in the context of managing salespeople's performance works for every part of the company. Imagine what your CFO would say if you went back and said, I can show you how to guarantee a return on investment for all the training we've ever paid for in the past. I'll just put this coaching thing into context. So as I mentioned, late 70s, early 80s, Galway came up with this non-directive approach to coaching. And then gradually it started being brought into the business world. And in the early 80s, when we were first learning it, at the end of the week, I went, do you know what? That was fantastic. I just coached that guy to a really good game of tennis. By the way, how does this help me as a manager? He went, we haven't quite figured that out yet, but we just think it should. Over a little bit of time, we sort of worked out, and a guy called Graham Alexander, who was the IBM executive who sponsored Galway to bring those people in to do the training, did some very, very clever thinking and came up with a structure for the coaching conversation. If you ever read anything about coaching, it's the GROW model. Okay, and it's the one that's most widely used. It's great for external coaches. Unfortunately, it doesn't work very well when a manager's coaching, because an external coach, life coach, executive coach, and leader as coach in the organization are two very, very different things. Very different. So we need to explore that a little bit more. There are lots of different role-specific conversations for the application of coaching as a leader. So whilst the basic communication skills are the same, it all diverges tremendously at that stage. So coaching is the process of making people think. It's delightfully simple. I'm a real believer in simplicity. Again, Einstein said, everything should be simplified as much as possible and no more. When you correctly analyze something to its simplest components, you often end up with three things. And it's almost impossible not to be able to recall three things. So it's probably worth us just looking at a bit at the current understanding of neuroscience So a bit more physics for you this morning. Because if you accept that coaching is the process of making people think, then you have to accept that you need to be able to get into their brains. Every time you access a piece of data in your brain, it goes, aha, that must be important. So I'll stick some more neurotransmitter chemicals there. Stronger bond means it's easier to access that information in the future. Every country has fairy stories where basically somebody meets a fairy, finds a bottle, gets a genie out of it, and gets 3 wishes. And it always goes horribly wrong, doesn't it? It always goes horribly wrong. Why? Because the genie gives you exactly what you asked for. Now the downside is your subconscious, your brain, does the same. So be careful what you ask. The other interesting thing is that your subconscious is just kind of sitting there on duty all the time. Here's the downside. We've all got friends who are a bit miserable, negative, disengaged. You know, they go to work, they do their job, but they're not really there. You know, you see them on the MRT in the morning. They're the ones with the wet hair and the tie sticking out of their pocket. Yeah, and they're kind of in the corner. Yeah, not really engaged. They didn't get out of bed, get all ready to go and go, wow, I'm up for a day, so I'm going to go to work. They're just not there. And they get the first cup of coffee and they sort of slump at their desks and they go, oh, why is my life so miserable? I know that one. And it rushes in to the database of all the information that's stored in your brain. It goes, you're too short, you're too fat, you don't earn enough, you're working in the wrong company, your parents were ugly, your ears stick out, your breath smells. Oh, and by the way, because you've accessed that information, it must be important. So I'll put some more neurotransmitter chemicals on there, so it'll be easier to think about that again tomorrow. This is why some people seem to just get happier and happier in life, and others just seem to get more and more miserable. Personal proficiency. That's the I'm the expert, I'm the best salesman. Yeah? Instead of holding on to your expertise and being the problem solver and telling your people what to do, if we go back to the way the brain is structured, when you coach, the key thing you do is listen. Listening is the preeminent skill. You can actually provoke more thinking by listening than you can by asking questions. One of the other differences between coaching as a manager and external executive coaches is that the external coach will say that the client owns the goal. It's the client's agenda, it's the client's goal, not inside the organization. There are multiple levels where ownership of the goal shifts. At the initial levels, if I'm your boss and I want to have a conversation with you about a performance issue, the future outcome is going to be you performing. This first conversation we're going to have, you are going to identify the change you need to make in order to perform. When we start getting into a more depth, then okay, you're going to be picking up on what's the interference for you, what's the difficulty. Yes, you're going to start taking ownership at a micro level. So it's like going into things in parentheses. So the deeper the coaching conversation, when we get down to specifics, okay, now you're going to own a piece of it. You're going to own a goal on how you change something. And it works. We actually got a client went on record last year saying in the worst recession ever, because he'd had his entire regional leadership team trained by us and coached over the year. Worst recession ever, 2/3 of the way through the year, they'd done 192% of their profit target. Attributable to his managers putting these new behaviors into practice.